what have you found is the best way to structure the advance and the organization so that you get the data you need and are able to communicate effectively? Because there is a structure to it, and an org structure that I know, Evan, you like to follow, and Gina, I'm assuming that there is on your end as well. Evan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it has to come from a top down. It really has to be a culture of understanding the value of why this is important. Because it's one thing to go out and get a new piece of software, a new application, and say, this is great, we're going to do this because everyone else is going to do this. And I remember seeing this when RFID access control kind of came onto the scene. A lot of events were doing it, and they weren't realizing some of the benefits of it, of what they could do with it, but they were doing it because that's what the other events were doing. And it comes from I think a better understanding and being able to do analysis, long-term analysis, year-over-year comparisons. But yes, I certainly have a way of doing it that is directly tied to the festival operations team. I know we all call things a little bit differently, the nomenclatures that we use for things, but I start with kind of the producer team, and they're directing to me what is if there are any areas of significant focus for this year that they felt like we lost money this year, or we think we can improve this year, or we know this is a new threat for this year's event. And it really kind of starts with identifying the stakeholders there that are participating in the process. And I kind of break it into those 4 different buckets of the asset advance, the credentials advance, catering, and then this one that is not new by any means, but more people are trying to do in the database, which is the kind of vendor contracting piece of it. And each of those has a different set of stakeholders. And so, it's getting buy-in from them and helping them develop the process, because, my process or what I think is appropriate may not be appropriate at all for the data that they're trying to capture or how they want to use the system. So, it really is engaging these different groups and trying to formulate at least the beginnings of a path forward, including things like deadline schedules and when things are actually going to be open to the people that are going to use the system. And it is for me, it's a very lengthy process, and it helps my understanding a lot, because I have to touch almost every area, every operational area of the event and the teams that are working the event.
And how about you, Gina?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a top-down approach. I think every year you kind of have to reevaluate what are the major changes for this year, and how are you going to save in certain places and expand in different ways. And I know, sometimes you're in a position that you don't get to allow people to ask for what they need. Like, you're just assigning, okay, you get this office or you get these carts. Sometimes that you have to request what they need, or you get 10 walkies, but who are they for and what days are they for? And you need that information from the leads. But generally, as you kind of evaluate all the different assets and resources that need to get allocated and ultimately get refined into specific numbers or specific people, then you can identify which ones are getting assigned, which ones are getting requested, and start to just break those apart and start to see when the deadlines are for each of those. A lot of times we need conversations with each manager to actually talk through all of those. Just having it come in on a spreadsheet, great. Sometimes it's very cut and dry. And, as Evan was mentioning earlier, sometimes you have to ask more questions about heavy machinery, about how are you going to use this? Why, you need us to dig holes for you? Great. Well, what are you doing? And how deep are those holes? And, there's generally conversations that have to happen for almost every type of asset after a request comes in. And sometimes you need to just understand, well, why did you ask for this? or why do you need one more this year? And then after that's been justified, you can come back and make a decision if that makes sense to give or not. But in general, it's kind of just coming up with what these things are and how you want to approach each individual topic, and then creating that foundation to allow people to contribute there and provide feedback and make a really cohesive loop between that info, so that it just passes through all the right ways. And it's great if you can figure out how many of a certain thing you need, but then what are you doing with that information? Now you need to cross check that with how many coolers do you actually have. Do you need to buy more coolers, or can you guys share coolers? Like, when you really get into it and have more things, like a quartermaster is full of stuff, you really need to plan exactly who's using what, who can share those things from showtime, to build and strike, who can really just collaborate on this and make it work. So it's a really important thing to just keep track of all of this and communicate and collaborate. And really, ultimately, it's to set every department up for success, while also keeping an eye on what your expenses are and making sure that just everything is a smooth ecosystem.
I think too, Chris, if I can add to that a little bit,
Yeah.
It really is the producers and the operational management that you need them to set the desired outcomes, right? You need them to set that and impart that upon the rest of the team. But the actual process of what's happening, you have to realize and think critically sometimes that, someone who is part of your event's internal team, the way that they advance things are going to be different than, let's say, a sponsor, than, let's say, an artist, than, let's say, a vendor that you've hired, or one of your F&B vendors, right? And not forcing your process or what you think is appropriate on that group. I mean, I've been very lucky to work with some amazing people in these areas, and I don't know anything about sponsors. I don't know the way that it works. I want them to tell me how we can use this tool, whether it's a centralized database or whether we've developed some, homegrown program with spreadsheets or whatnot. How can we use this to fit what their needs are and the information that they're trying to capture, and never assuming that one size is going to fit all. I mean, I guess it's better than getting nothing at all if you only had one way of doing it across all of your groups. But when you really start thinking critically about it, you need to engage all of the different groups and these stakeholders in these groups, because they are trying to ultimately they're trying to meet the outcome that I hope that the promoters and producers are setting. And that's, putting on a safe and profitable event.